The road had been empty for miles, gray asphalt stretching under a sky bruised with clouds. I had driven past it countless times before, never noticing the faint outline of what would later become the center of my obsession. That morning, the mist clung to the roadside like a memory, refusing to fade, curling around the skeletal trees, and the faded signs warning of danger long forgotten. The hospital appeared first as a shape, half swallowed by fog and decay. Its windows were blind eyes, some shattered, some clouded with dust that had settled over decades of neglect. I parked at the edge of the gravel lot, the crunch of tires breaking the oppressive silence. Every instinct told me to leave, to turn around, but the camera in my hands and the recorder in my bag insisted otherwise. The story demanded it. I stepped out, the wind carrying a metallic tang, faint and sharp, as though the building exhaled in warning. The main entrance was a yawning void, doors warped and hanging from their hinges. Inside, the air was cold, almost viscous, and every footstep echoed against tile walls cracked and worn. The scent of mold and rust coalesced into something that felt almost alive, crawling along the walls and floors. I moved slowly, my flashlight beam cutting a thin path through the darkness. Each room told its own story. Gurneys overturned, peeling paint revealing layers of forgotten eras. Discarded medical charts scattered like leaves. In one corner, a bed frame leaned at an impossible angle, and I caught a glint of something metallic under the grime. My hand shook, though I could not explain why. There was a pattern in the decay, subtle but unmistakable. Hallways were blocked at intervals, yet traces suggested someone or something had passed through them long after the hospital was abandoned. Faint footprints, eroded and incomplete, led toward the upper floors. My recorder captured the low hum of electricity somewhere deep in the building, though no lights worked. A mechanical memory of the past, or a warning. I found myself in what had once been the surgical wing. Light filtered in through broken windows, painting the room in strokes of pale gray and amber. Tables still bore the outlines of instruments, their shapes warped by rust. I ran my fingers along the surface, half expecting to feel warmth, a pulse, some remnant of life, but the cold was absolute. It was there I first noticed the walls. They were not just cracked. They seemed to ride under the weight of their own neglect. Faint stains traced lines that suggested something more than time had passed over them. Shadows pooled in corners, though the beam of my flashlight should have penetrated. I could hear the faintest of whispers, like distant conversation carried on the ventilation shafts. I told myself it was the wind, the building settling, the pressure of a mind teetering at the edge of obsession. I moved upstairs, drawn by the same compulsion that had carried me across abandoned towns and ruined institutions. The second floor was a maze of corridors, each more deteriorated than the last. I noted the numbers above doors, their paint flaking, revealing older numbers beneath, as though the hospital had rewritten its own history in layers. My recorder caught the subtle change in acoustics. The floorboards groaned in patterns that mimicked footsteps. Yet when I paused listening, there was nothing. A room at the end of the hall was sealed with a heavy metal door. Rusted hinges threatened to give way with any touch. I pushed, and it opened just enough to peer inside. The beam of my flashlight fell upon a collection of objects that had no right to be there. Personal belongings, photographs yellow with age, journals scattered open. The air felt denser here, pressing against my chest. A single word kept appearing on page after page, scratched in different handwritings. Observe. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and the door swung shut behind me with a hollow clang. My recorder picked up a soft, almost imperceptible sound. A dragging, repeated 3 times, then silence. I told myself it was the building settling again, but the instinct in my gut warned me otherwise. Outside, the fog had thickened, the sun dimmed behind it. I took a moment to breathe, to recount what I had seen, and that was when I noticed the other figure, a shadow among shadows, just beyond the tree line, watching. I blinked, and it was gone, but the sense of being observed lingered. My camera recorded nothing but empty mist. I returned the next day, compelled despite every rational thought screaming that I should not. The hospital seemed to breathe with anticipation, as though aware of my intrusion. Each hallway now felt familiar, yet altered. Objects had shifted. Stains that had been faint yesterday were vivid today. Footsteps followed, just out corner of my eye. It was on the third day that I finally reached the central wing, the heart of the building. The ceiling had partially collapsed, exposing the sky in jagged shards of light. In the center of the room, a wheel of chairs, each tipped over, formed a silent circle. The air hummed, a low vibration that resonated through my bones. My hand shook as I adjusted the camera, capturing every inch, every shadow. And then I saw it, a door I had not noticed before, plain, unmarked, almost camouflaged in peeling paint. I approached slowly, senses heightened. My hand hovered over the handle, and the vibration in the room intensified, almost like a heartbeat. I recorded the moment, documenting everything, telling myself that the story demanded it. The door creaked open, revealing darkness, so complete it seemed to swallow the light. I stepped forward, and the floor groaned under my weight. Something shifted inside, unseen but palpable, as though the building itself exhaled a warning. I froze. My breath came shallow and fast, the sound loud in the stillness. Then, just as I was about to peer inside further, a faint scratching came from the far wall. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. I turned to leave, heart hammering, and realized the door behind me had slammed shut. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. A soft, almost imperceptible voice whispered my name. Not my name exactly, but something that sounded like it, stretched and distorted. My recorder had fallen, still running, capturing the sound I could not explain. I swallowed hard and backed away, the darkness pressing in from every side. And then as I reached the edge of the room, I noticed the first clue that would haunt me for the rest of my days. A trail of footprints, not my own, leading deeper into the darkness, past the point where light or reason could reach. I turned the camera one last time before the battery died, capturing nothing but the black void. And in that moment, I understood with chilling clarity that the hospital was not abandoned. It was waiting. I forced myself to take a deep breath, pressing my back against the cold wall, the darkness pressing like water around me. The footprints led deeper, down a hallway that I had never noticed before, one that seemed to twist and lengthen with every step I took. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that grew taller, thinner, and impossibly distorted. Each room I passed told a story of abandonment, yet not quite abandonment. Chairs were tipped, charts were scattered, yet there were traces of recent presence. A notebook with pages turned, a cup tipped but still holding the faintest condensation. It was as if someone or something had been here, waiting, watching, studying. I reached the central atrium, a space that had once been grand, now collapsed into ruin. The skylight above had shattered, letting in the gray light of the afternoon, painting jagged patterns on the cracked floor. In the center, a wheel of hospital gurneys formed a mockery of order, their shadows dancing like specters under the weak light. Then I saw it, a single chair upright, facing a wall, perfectly centered. On the wall, written in a hand that was neither mine nor remembered from any patient charts, was a word, remember. The letters were smeared, blurred, yet unmistakable. My stomach turned, a cold nausea rising as I whispered to myself that it must have been leftover graffiti from decades ago. But the air changed. The hum in the walls intensified, vibrating to the floor into my bones. I turned slowly, scanning the room, and noticed that the shadows were moving against the light, sliding, stretching, converging. The building was alive, not in a mechanical sense, but in the deliberate, knowing sense of a predator tracking its prey. I followed the footprints further, now moving through a wing that had once been dedicated to pediatrics. Tiny beds, rusted cribs, toys decayed and broken littered the floor. A faint lullaby echoed from nowhere, soft and warped, making the hair on my arms rise. I told myself it was the wind, the building settling, but the notes were deliberate, uneven, human. In a small room at the far end, I found a door slightly ajar. The hinges groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the walls were covered in photos, dozens of them black and white, some fading into sepia. Faces of patients, doctors, nurses, some smiling, some solemn. Each photo had dates scribbled in the corner, and some had annotations in a shaky hand. Do not forget, watch them. The floor beneath me groaned. I stepped back, nearly tripping over a pile of torn medical records. That's when I noticed a pattern. The footprints on the floor led not toward the exit, but inward, spiraling into a stairwell that descended below the hospital. My recorder had captured it all. The faint sound of dragging, the low whispering that no human voice could produce. I hesitated at the stairwell's mouth, the darkness stretching like a black maw. My instinct screamed to leave, but the story, the obsession, pulled me forward. Every step I took echoed too loudly, bouncing off walls and ceilings as if announcing my intrusion. The further I descended, the colder it became. The air thickened, carrying a scent of rust, mold, and something else. Something organic, sour, and unmistakably alive. At the bottom, the hallway opened into a vast chamber. Broken equipment lined the walls, and in the center, a table lay untouched. Around it were markings on the floor, symbols etched into the concrete, faded but still deliberate. My flashlight beam caught something at the far wall, a door slightly ajar, but behind it was nothing visible, just darkness, deep and absolute. And then I heard it, a whisper, clear and direct, echoing from behind that door. Not a word I could recognize, but a call, a beckoning. My breath caught in my throat, and the hairs on my neck stood at rigid attention. My instinct screamed to run, to escape into the fog outside, but I could not. I was compelled to record it, to witness it, to prove that what I was seeing was real. I stepped closer, raising my camera, the red recording light blinking. The darkness seemed to thicken, pulsate, as if it were aware of me, aware that I had reached the heart of its domain. I raised my hand, pushed the door open, and just before contact, the shadows behind me shifted violently, forming shapes that were both human and not. My heart slammed against my ribs, my vision tunneled. Yet I could not tear my eyes away. The recorder captured everything. The whispers, the movement, the low hum of unseen machinery or life. And then a single word, clear as day, resonated in the chamber. Stay. I froze. My instincts, my entire being, screamed to retreat, but the word had rooted me to the spot. I turned slowly, the beam of the flashlight catching a figure, or perhaps a trick of shadow, standing at the far end of the room. It was impossibly tall, impossibly still, and yet it exuded intent, awareness. The camera's battery died. The light went out. The whispering ceased. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until I realized with a jolt that I could no longer tell where the chamber ended and the shadows began. I fumbled for the recorder in the dark, the echo of my own movements deafening, and then I felt it. A brush of air across my neck, cold on the floor, deliberate, impossible, the kind of cold that belonged to something watching, waiting, patient. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the table. My flashlight hit the wall, illuminating a message scrawled in fresh red paint. You should not have come. And in that moment, as the darkness pressed close, I realized the truth I've been running from all along. This hospital was never abandoned. It had been waiting, and now, so had I. The darkness did not recede. Even outside the walls, even in memory, it clung to me, a weight pressing against lungs that had once drawn air freely. I had no choice but to return to the hospital, compelled by the fragments of evidence, the camera footage, the whispering recordings that haunted every moment of my waking life. I approached the building once more under the gray veil of dawn. The fog had thickened, hugging the road and trees like a living shroud. The main entrance yawned before me, silent, patient, as though expecting my return. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, each sound echoing across the empty lot, carried off by the morning wind. Inside, the air was heavier than memory. Every step seemed to echo longer, the walls leaning inward in impossible angles. I retraced my path to the lower chamber, the stairwell descending into the bowels of the hospital. Shadows pooled in corners, and the faint hum that had been my companion for days intensified, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. The chamber waited. The table in the center, once surrounded by symbols, now bore new marks, darker, more deliberate. They were not random. Lines intersected, circles overlapped, forming shapes that seemed to pulse when I looked away. The symbols whispered the back of my mind, voices half heard, half invented. I shook my head, telling myself it was exhaustion, obsession, the weight of isolation. Then I noticed the doorway at the far end. It had been closed before, or had I not seen it clearly? And now it stood ajar, blackness behind it swallowing the weak light of my flashlight. I stepped forward. Each step seemed to stretch time itself, the air growing colder, thicker, almost tactile. Inside the room, objects I could not identify lay scattered, some metallic, some organic, all corrupted by decay. The air vibrated with a whisper of movement just beyond perception. I reached for the camera, recording everything, my hands trembling as though the building itself resisted documentation. And then I heard it, breathing, slow, deliberate, echoing in rhythm with mine. Not my own, not human, but close enough to terrify, to suggest a presence just out of reach. My recorder caught it, low and rhythmic, blending with the hum of the hospital's walls. A figure emerged, or appeared to. It was not solid, not fully, but unmistakably aware. Tall, thin, human-like. Yet the edges blurred, as if the darkness had clothed itself in flesh. It did not move toward me, but stood, observing, waiting. The air between us thrummed with intent. I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, and caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A series of photographs taped to the wall. Faces I did not recognize. All staring, eyes wide, expressions of fear and resignation. In each, a single figure, shadowed, tall, impossible, loomed behind the subject. The same figure now before me. My flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness between pulses, the figure shifted closer, not in steps, but in some impossible slide, like it was drawn by gravity alone, an entity that ignored the rules of space. My chest tightened. My camera captured it all, yet the lens seemed to distort what I saw, as if reality itself protested documentation. I ran, blindly, through corridors that seemed to twist with every turn. The building had changed. Hallways that once led to storage now led to rooms I had never seen. Doors appeared where none existed. Corridors looped impossibly. Ceilings stretched and fell at angles that defied reason. I realized with a cold clarity that the hospital itself was alive, an organism of shadow, memory, and intent. And then I found the room I had sought. The walls were lined with old hospital records, stacked and layered in grotesque order. On the floor, a single journal lay open, fresh ink scrawled across the pages. They remember you, and now you'll remember them. A whisper came from nowhere, and everywhere at once. My name distorted, drawn out. I turned. Shadows moved with intention. My flashlight flickered again and caught glimpses of more figures, more presences, half-formed, watching. A door slammed somewhere above, echoing through the chambers. The building groaned, responded, and then the journal's pages began to flip on their own, one after another, until they stopped at a single phrase. Look up. I lifted my gaze to the ceiling, expecting collapse, darkness, something tangible, but instead, the ceiling seemed infinite. Shapes moved above, twisting, writhing in patterns that suggested thought, awareness, malice. I realized then that the hospital was not merely haunted. It was sentient, cataloging, judging, waiting for me to succumb. My camera battery died. My recorder had stopped. The flashlight flickered one final time and illuminated the doorway at the far end. Empty, yet a shadow passed behind it, impossibly tall, slow, deliberate, and then silence. I backed away, realized with dread that the exit I had followed before no longer existed. Corridors stretched endlessly, walls bending, rooms reshaping themselves. The building had trapped me, or perhaps invited me. I could not tell. And then I heard the whisper again, clear, deliberate, and chilling. You are part of the story now. I froze, heart pounding, breath shallow. The darkness shifted. The air thickened, and from the far corner of the chamber, something moved, just a shadow at first, then a shape, growing deliberate, as if it had waited for this precise moment. And as I raised the camera one last time, I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the room, impossibly tall, impossibly still, and yet aware. Then, without warning, the floor beneath me gave a subtle tremor, and a low rumble echoed from deep within the hospital's foundations. Dust fell from the ceiling. A distant metallic sound, like chains, began to drag across the corridors. I realized with a cold certainty that this was only the beginning. The hospital had more to reveal, more to claim, and I was already entwined in it. And then, from the deepest shadows, a faint light pulsed, a doorway I had never seen before, emanating an unnatural glow. I stepped toward it, compelled beyond reason, and as I reached the frame, a whisper echoed, slicing through the thick, suffocating air. Do not enter yet. And in that moment, the shadows behind me shifted, closer, patient, watching, waiting for the next move. The glow from the distant doorway pulsed, soft and insistent, a heartbeat in the oppressive darkness. My hands shook, fingers grazing the cold, peeling walls as I moved forward, each step a negotiation with terror itself. The air smelled of iron and mildew, yet beneath it lingered metallic tang I could not place, like the memory of blood long dried but not forgotten. I reached the doorway, and the light spilled across the floor, casting patterns that made the shadows writhe. The walls behind me seemed to pulse in rhythm with it, as though the building had synchronized itself with glow. To my fear, I hesitated, caught between instinct to flee and compulsion to witness. The room beyond was unlike anything I had seen before. Its architecture defied logic. Walls stretched and folded, angles impossible, ceilings that expanded and contracted like lungs. In the center, a large circular pit descended into darkness, and around it, symbols etched into floor glowed faintly, resonating with a strange energy. My camera captured it all, yet the lens seemed inadequate to the scale of what I saw. I stepped closer, peering into the pit. The shadows inside moved independently, curling and twisting in forms that suggested consciousness. From its depths, faint whispers rose, fragmented words, names, screams, half-formed warnings. They were not all human, yet I understood them, each syllable pressing into my mind like a memory I had never lived. And then I saw them, figures, not in the shadows, but climbing, crawling, emerging from the pit itself. They were distorted, neither alive nor dead, limbs elongating and bending in impossible ways. Faces blurred, merging with the darkness, yet eyes, countless, unblinking, focused on me. My chest tightened, and the recorder caught a low, vibrating tone that thrummed through bone and sinew. I stumbled back, tripping over a piece of debris. The glow pulsed again, faster this time, and the room shifted. The walls bent inward, the floor tilted, and the ceiling stretched impossibly high. I realized that the hospital itself was not merely alive. It was a living labyrinth, responsive to my fear, aware of my presence, reshaping itself around me. The figures moved closer, emerging from shadow and pit alike, circling, observing. Their movements were synchronized, deliberate, patient. I raised the camera, recording, but the lens flickered, distorted, showing flashes of places I had never seen. The hospital's past, patients long gone, events I could not reconcile. A whisper rose above all else, clear, resonant. "You cannot leave what belongs to us." The sound reverberated through the walls, into the floor, through my skull. I stumbled backward, the symbols on the floor glowing brighter, forming a circle that seemed to pull me inward. I felt the pull, a gravity not a matter but of intent, dragging me toward the pit. And then from above, the glowing doorway pulsed violently, illuminating the entire chamber. Shapes moved across its threshold, more figures, taller, darker, their forms shifting impossibly between light and shadow. One of them stepped forward, closer than any had dared, and I felt its awareness press against my mind. It was not malicious, not exactly, but calculating, measuring, as though weighing my worth. I raised the camera one last time, capturing everything, my hands trembling violently. The recorder lay on the floor, still running, capturing whispers I could not fully comprehend. My breath was ragged, each exhale visible in the cold, dense air. And then, without warning, the pit's shadows surged upward, the glowing circle on the floor expanding, swirling around me, pulling me closer. I stumbled backward, catching the edge of the doorway, and in the sudden flash of light, I glimpsed something terrifying. A figure standing behind me, human almost, but impossibly tall, its eyes hollow, yet they burned with intent. It raised a hand slowly, deliberately, as if beckoning me to step forward into the darkness I had been trying to resist. The air thickened, vibrating with intensity that pressed against my chest. I understood in that moment that the hospital was not merely a building. It was a sentient force, a collector of memories, of fear, of life itself. And now it had chosen me as part of its story. I stumbled forward into the pit's edge, caught between instinct to flee and compulsion to continue. The glow of the doorway pulsed faster, brighter, the whispers escalating into a chorus of names, screams, and warnings. The figures shifted around me, their forms merging with the darkness, with the light, with the symbols themselves. And just as I felt the pull of the pit take me completely, a shadow detached from the circle of figures. It moved with impossible speed, striking the air above me. My vision blurred, the glow intensified, blinding, and I was forced to close my eyes. When I opened them again, the pit had vanished. The symbols on the floor had faded. The chamber seemed empty, silent, still, normal, almost welcoming. But I knew better. The feeling of being observed had not left. My camera, still recording, captured nothing. Yet in the corner, faintly, the glow of another doorway flickered. A doorway that had never existed before. I took a step toward it, my body trembling, heart hammering. The hospital seemed to pulse around me, alive, aware, waiting. And as my hand reached the frame, a whisper echoed from nowhere, sharp, urgent, impossibly close. This is not the end. I froze, every instinct screaming that turning back would be impossible. Shadows shifted behind me, taller than before, merging into the walls, the ceiling, the floor. And then the glow intensified, brighter than anything I had seen, and I felt a presence, calculated, patient, eternal, pressing into my mind, waiting to reveal what lay beyond the next threshold. I stepped forward, and the doorway swallowed me. The secrets of Route 9 are far from over. What lurks in the shadows of the abandoned hospital is watching, waiting, and now it knows you're here. If you thought you were safe until now, think again. Don't miss the next episode of this true crime horror investigation. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us if you dare